Every town has places that don't quite belong. Roads people avoid after dark, houses no one talks about, addresses that somehow never make it into conversation. Most of us spend our lives passing them without ever stopping. I wasn't that lucky. All it took was one delivery. Welcome to nightmares in small doses. The most terrifying night of my life happened when I was delivering food for a pizza place. One particular night, everything seemed like it was going to be just another normal and boring night delivering pizzas, but it was far from that when I received an order for a pepperoni pizza to a house on the outskirts of town. The town was small and surrounded by woods. The house I had to deliver to was 15 minutes outside of town. It was a bit of a long trip compared to normal, but the house was still within the pizza place's delivery zone. This delivery to a rural area made me feel a little uneasy, but work is work, and if the boss told me to go there, I had to go, whether I wanted to or not. I couldn't afford to refuse. It was my only source of income. Guided by the GPS, off I went on my delivery motorcycle, driving above the speed limit. Thanks to that, I managed to reach the house in 9 minutes instead of 15. The house where I was delivering the pizza was in the middle of nowhere. It was an old wooden house in terrible condition that, at first glance, looked abandoned. There were no other houses nearby and no sign of any human beings within a 10-mile radius. That made me a little worried. Even the sounds of insects made me uneasy. I just wanted to deliver the pizza and get back to town as quickly as possible. I knocked on the door, and no one answered. After a minute, a man appeared and opened the door. "Who are you?" the man said with a grumpy expression. His voice was rough, like something scraping against gravel. I was startled. The man standing in front of me looked terrifying. Half a dozen long strands of hair hanging from a bald and dirty neck, yellow teeth, some of them rotten. A week-old beard, all messy and greasy. That man reeked, though I couldn't tell of what exactly. It's the pizza delivery, pepperoni pizza, I said nervously. I was getting chills just from looking at the man. "Oh yes, I had forgotten." "Come in," he said, now with a smile on his face and forced friendliness. He opened the door for me to come inside. That won't be necessary. I have to get back because I already have another delivery," I said, trying to get out of there. "Here's your pizza." "But I have to pay, right?" the man said, still with a sinister smile on his face. Yes, that'll be $8, I said awkwardly. I had completely forgotten about the money. I just wanted to get out of there. "Then I'll go get the money. Please come in. I'd feel bad leaving you out here on such a cold night," the man said with his sinister friendliness as he walked away to get the money. He actually had a point. It really was cold, so I stepped inside but stayed very close to the door. The inside of the house looked abandoned, with very little furniture, and what it did have was very old. The walls were dirty and full of holes. The worst part was the smell coming from inside the house. It was horrible. It smelled like something dead. I even felt nauseous because of how intense that sickening odor was. I was actually considering running away when the man appeared again. Finally, I thought, eager to get this over with. The man had his right arm hidden behind his back. "Sorry to keep you waiting," the man said, still wearing that sinister smile. "Here's the money." When he stood in front of me, he pulled the arm out from behind his back. He had a spray can in his hand. Very quickly, the man sprayed my face. I shut my eyes because they were burning, and I started coughing uncontrollably. My throat burned terribly too. I felt like I was suffocating and struggled to inhale oxygen. I wanted to scream in panic and agony, but I couldn't even do that. Within a few seconds, I lost consciousness and collapsed to the floor. When I woke up, I could still feel the burning in my eyes and throat. I could open my eyes, but it was difficult. The coughing came back, but only for a short time. My head was ringing, and a wave of nausea washed over me. A few seconds later, I became completely frozen when I realized where I was, and what state I was in. I was completely naked, tied to an old wooden chair. In front of me was a table with 3 chairs, with a plate, knife, and fork set in front of it. I was beginning to panic. I didn't scream, but I violently tried to move my arms and legs in an attempt to free myself from the restraints. I looked around, and there were no windows, only 4 dirty walls. The ropes were thin and old, tightly binding my arms and legs to the chair. The ropes were so rough and tied so tightly that the more I struggled to free myself, the more they cut into my skin. Blood was running from my wrists and ankles. I didn't know why I was there, completely naked and tied to a chair. I started accepting my fate. I was probably going to be tortured and killed by that psychopath who ordered the pizza. A tear began to run down my right cheek when I realized what would happen if I died. No one would even notice I was gone. I had no girlfriend, no children, and my parents were dead. In this new town, I had no friends, and my boss didn't care about me. In my boss's eyes, I was just another employee. Literally, no one was ever going to notice I was missing. That only made me feel even more depressed. I heard voices. They were coming from outside the room where I was. I recognized the voice of the man who had spoken to me a few hours earlier. The voices were getting closer and closer. The door opened, and 2 men walked in with sinister smiles and slices of pizza in their hands. "Oh, hello, friend. Sorry for the delay, but we're about to begin," said Cletus, still wearing his sinister smile. "Oh, and I never introduced myself. I'm Cletus, and this is Daryl." Daryl looked very similar to Cletus. Both of them were dirty, with yellow teeth, some of them rotten. A few strands of hair and greasy, unkempt beards. I suspected they were brothers. "When is he coming?" Cletus asked Daryl, completely ignoring me. "I don't know," Daryl said with a shrug. "Shouldn't be much longer." Despair slowly invaded my mind. They clearly weren't going to let me go. I didn't even know what they were going to do to me. I felt myself getting weaker and weaker, both mentally and physically. It wouldn't take much to break me and make me give up. I simply accepted my fate. The chances of getting out of there alive were so small that I didn't even want to think about it anymore. I would become just another number in this year's missing persons statistics. Tears ran down my face. "Why me?" I said quietly. They didn't answer me. "Why me?" I screamed with all my strength and anger. I had nothing left to lose. The worst thing they could do was kill me, and I was already expecting that, so at least I wanted to know before I died. "Shut up or I'll cut your tongue out, you son of a bitch," Cletus said in a threatening tone. "Relax. He at least has the right to know why. Besides, in 5 minutes he'll be dead anyway," Daryl said to Cletus. I wasn't even surprised when I heard I was going to die. In my mind, I had already accepted that it was what was going to happen. "Fine. You want to know?" Cletus said sarcastically, his sinister smile returning to his face. "You're going to be Mark's meal." "What?" I said, confused. "Yes, you heard right," Cletus said, still wearing his sinister smile. "Mark hasn't been himself these past few months. You see, we've been messing around with powerful things that possessed Mark. Since then, he's been starving for human flesh, and you're going to be his meal." "What the fuck?" I said quietly. I had no words for what I had just heard. What a sick situation I had gotten myself into. The worst part was realizing that I was probably going to be eaten alive. That thought sent chills through me. I already knew it was going to be a long and torturous night. Normally, we kidnap a homeless person when we have more time to plan these things. But today, Mark is starving, and we had to improvise, so we came up with the brilliant idea of ordering food delivery. That way, we eat the food, and Mark eats the delivery guy. In 20 minutes, we all end up satisfied with our dinner. Sorry it has to be this way, because if it wasn't you, it would have been one of us, Daryl said, trying to justify me being in that position, but he immediately stopped speaking when the door opened. Cletus and Daryl suddenly became serious. I could even sense some fear coming from them. I stopped being afraid. After what I had heard, there was nothing I could do, and I simply accepted what was going to happen to me. The person I assumed was Mark walked into the room. A chill ran down my spine. Mark looked a lot like Cletus and Daryl physically. They were probably all brothers, but he was different. His skin was extremely pale, almost white. His eyes were blood red, and black slime was dripping from his mouth. I had never seen anyone like that before. I remembered what Cletus had said. We've been messing around with powerful things that possessed Mark. And yes, I could clearly see that something was possessing Mark, something that fed on living human flesh. Now I was scared again. Here he is, Cletus said nervously to Mark. Mark looked at him and didn't respond. Then he looked at me, and I immediately looked away. I couldn't maintain eye contact with him for even a second. Just his presence made me uncomfortable, but his eyes, those made me uneasy. Mark walked toward me. He bent down until his face was only inches from mine. I kept my head lowered. I didn't even want to look at him. The smell of his breath reached my nose. It made me want to throw up, and I probably would have if I had anything in my stomach. It smelled like decay. Mark's hand grabbed my chin and forced it upward, making me look him in the eyes. "Look at me," Mark said with his rough, raspy voice. He sounded like someone who smoked at least 100 cigarettes a day. "Don't be afraid. It'll hurt at first, but it won't take long. Be proud that you're satisfying the hunger of the great Gorthak." I didn't know what he meant by that, but I didn't want to know. I was only thinking about getting out of there or dying as quickly as possible. There was no middle ground. The only problem was that I couldn't see a way for either of those things to happen. And because of that, panic began to settle inside me once again. I started shaking and thrashing in the chair with all the strength I had. The ropes were tied tightly, and they tore into my skin every time I struggled to break free. I couldn't even feel the pain because of the adrenaline rushing through me at that moment. Without wasting any time, Mark opened his mouth to take a bite. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed that inside that mouth full of black slime, Mark had more teeth than a normal human being. In a panic, I struggled so violently trying to free myself before Mark could bite me that I lost my balance along with the chair and fell to the floor. The chair shattered into several pieces. I was lucky that it was made of wood and was clearly very old. Without hesitation, Mark grabbed my neck and opened his mouth to take a huge bite and finally satisfy his hunger when, now free from the restraints, in a split second I grabbed a piece of wood from the broken chair and slammed it into Mark's head. It pierced straight through from one side to the other. I had put all my strength into that strike. Mark froze instantly, and then blood began to gush out. Mark's body collapsed on top of my naked body. Warm, bright red blood ran across my skin. I tried to push Mark's body off me, but I no longer had the strength. Cletus and Daryl stood frozen for a few seconds after seeing everything happen right before their eyes. Then they rushed over and pulled Mark's body off me. They laid Mark beside me. They looked startled when they saw that Mark looked normal again. His eyes, though lifeless, were normal. His mouth no longer had the black slime, and his face was no longer as pale as before. Then they looked at me. A chill ran down their spines. I could sense it. My naked body was covered in blood, but that wasn't what frightened me the most. I felt my body changing, as if something had taken my place and I had become a spectator inside my own body. My skin had turned pale, and black slime was coming out of my mouth. Gorthak was inside me now. "Run!" Cletus screamed. Cletus and Daryl ran toward the door in complete panic. Daryl managed to get out, and Cletus was just about to escape when I grabbed him. Now possessed, I seized him by the throat and lifted him effortlessly as if he weighed nothing. "Where do you think you're going?" "I haven't eaten today yet," Gorthak said through my mouth. Right after that, I bit into Cletus's neck, tearing out his Adam's apple and everything that made up his throat. Blood sprayed everywhere, and my face became completely covered in warm blood. Over the next 5 minutes, I devoured Cletus completely. I felt an enormous hunger that was slowly being satisfied. All that remained was Daryl, who was running down the road as fast as he could without looking back. Fear was what drove him to run as fast as he could. 20 minutes later, I caught up to him and left nothing but bones behind, finally, though only temporarily, satisfying Gorthak's hunger. Thank you for joining me for another dose of nightmares. If you enjoyed the story, be sure to subscribe and leave a like, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you'd like even more stories to keep you awake at night, consider joining my Patreon, where you can read and listen to exclusive nightmares you won't find anywhere else. Until next time, happy nightmares.